9. Snow and Ashes. The gym was decorated with several hundred silver and white balloons and enough streamers to wrap around the entire planet twice. Shiny aluminum foil stars hung from the ceiling. A large white banner draped over the DJ's booth proclaimed in swirling blue script that the students were indeed at Bathory Junior High's annual Snowball. Vlad was leaning up against the wall near the punch bowl, watching two girls giggle excitedly to his left. Henry punched him lightly in the arm. "You could at least be nice to her. I mean, she's not Meredith, but she is your date. Besides, she's pretty cute." But Vlad didn't want to be nice to Carrie Anderson. He wanted to be nice to Meredith, whom he hadn't seen since winter break. She was currently laughing at something witty that Tom Gaber had just said. Vlad raised his head up and thumped it against the wall. "I should have stayed home." Carrie leaned over to Kelly Anbrock, and both girls erupted in another fit of giggles. Henry smiled at Kelly, and she blushed. "Hey, Kelly, you want to dance?" "Sure." They moved onto the dance floor. Kelly draped her arms around Henry's neck, and they turned in slow circles together. On their second turn, Henry gestured to Carrie with his eyes. Vlad glanced at Meredith, whom Tom was clutching too close for Vlad's comfort. "Carrie." "I'd love to." Carrie dragged him onto the dance floor. She flung her arms around him, and Vlad suddenly remembered what Henry had told him when he'd arranged their dates for the evening. Carrie was a great kisser. But he didn't reflect long enough to explore how Henry had come by this information. Vlad placed his hands on her waist and shifted his feet back and forth until they were turning just slightly. He hated dancing, and he didn't especially want to kiss Carrie. But it was better than not having a date at all. Besides, it wasn't like Carrie was a troll or anything. She had sparkling green eyes and curly red hair. Henry was right. She was pretty cute. Tom was laughing so loud that everyone in the gym turned their heads to see what was so funny. Vlad turned his head to look at the far end of the gym behind him where Tom was looking, but there wasn't anything particularly humorous there, unless you counted the horrific tissue flowers the dance committee had taped to the wall in the shape of a snowflake. But that was more scary and ridiculous than funny. Vlad turned his head back to Tom, and his heart sank. Tom was pointing directly at him. "Hey, goth boy, how much did you have to pay Carrie to dance with you?" Bill was snickering along with Tom. To Vlad's immense surprise, Carrie giggled and pulled away. A few stragglers near Tom and Bill chuckled openly. But Meredith wasn't laughing anymore. Vlad straightened his shoulders and gave a sly smile to Tom. "Not a dime. I just offered her tickets to your next ballet recital." The crowd went silent. Music poured from the DJ's speakers, a heavy bass line that echoed into the gym. Vlad looked at Henry, whose jaw had almost literally hit the floor. Tom's face had turned purple, and Vlad could count the number of veins popping out of his forehead. 3. Probably the same number of seconds Vlad had to live once Tom got hold of him. It was Mike Brennan who broke the silence. He howled with laughter and stepped away from Tom to pat Vlad on the back. Vlad managed to smile but kept his eyes on Tom. It's hard to celebrate when your face is about to be mashed to a pulp. Henry's laughter followed Mike's, and soon the entire room was howling, all but Tom, Bill, and Meredith. Carrie rushed into Vlad's arms and planted an unexpected, enthusiastic kiss on his lips. Over her shoulder, Vlad watched as Tom pleaded with Meredith to stay. His begging had apparently fallen on deaf ears, as Meredith yanked her hand away and disappeared out the gym door. Vlad pulled away from Carrie and took 2 steps toward the door, but it was too late. Meredith was gone. Vlad waited until the next day to tell Henry all about his experience with the book and his theories about the strange note left by his father. What if somebody killed him? And Mom, and the answers are somewhere in my old house. Henry was less than enthusiastic. Vlad, your parents died 3 years ago. It was an accident. A horrible, awful accident. Do you really think your dad would have had the foresight to leave you cryptic notes? He probably wrote that for someone else. He was sitting on the edge of Vlad's bed, glancing carefully toward the closed door. Vlad ran his thumb over the cover of the book. The glyph flickered in response. I'm not saying we shouldn't check it out, Henry went on. Who knows? We might find something, but the odds of your dad knowing he was going to die and that you'd be alive and in possession of his book? Henry's eyes dropped to the tome in question. Well, they're not good. Vlad placed his palm against the glyph. The locks clicked and opened. I'm going to my old house to look around. Are you coming or not? Henry was watching him with a look of unease. Whoa, how'd you do that? Do what? Your eyes. Vlad tilted his head, wondering exactly what Henry was talking about. He was about to ask when Henry said, Just now, when you touched the book, your eyes changed color. They were kinda purple. Vlad laughed, but stopped when he saw the flicker of fear in Henry's eyes. Seriously? At Henry's nod, Vlad carried the book into the bathroom. He placed his hand on the glyph and watched his reflection. His irises seemed to shift and ripple like the surface of a pond when broken by a tossed stone. The rippling slowed, then ceased. Vlad's eyes flashed a shade of lavender. Vlad almost dropped the book. Whoa! Henry was standing behind him. He winced when he saw Vlad's eyes change again. That's freaky! Henry looked over Vlad's shoulder at the open book. I thought you promised Nellie you'd stay away from your old house. I owe it to my dad to break that promise, Henry. I have to look around at least. What if my dad really did know that he was going to die? Vlad read his father's note over again and shut the book. He was going to his old house, with or without Henry. Diablo pulled off his leather gloves and tossed them onto the charred floor of Thomas's bedroom. It's not possible. He looked around the room. It smelled like ashes. It smelled like death. Diablo clucked his tongue and closed his eyes. Where are you, Thomas? You can't possibly be dead. When he opened his eyes, he noticed a small panel beside the charred bed. He knelt and brushed away the soot with his fingers. The glyph glowed a cool blue. A wicked smile crossed Diablo's face. What's this? He pressed his palm against the glyph, and it glowed brighter before the panel opened inward. Inside the small compartment were cobwebs, 3 dead spiders, and a photograph of a boy with black hair. Diablo clutched the picture in his hand and frowned. Well, well, Vladimir Todd, and no sign of your father's beloved journal. He slid the photo into his pocket and moved to the board-covered window. It would soon be getting light. It was time to leave. Diablo let himself quietly out of the house. His stomach rumbled with hunger, but he ignored it. There was no time to eat, and sleepiness was beginning to overtake him. When the sun fell once again, he would feed. Vlad's old house was at the opposite end of town, in a place neither Vlad nor Henry had been in the 3 years since the accident. Nellie had put the property up for sale twice in that time, but both times Vlad had talked her out of selling it to add to his college fund. Someday, he told her, someday he'd have the strength to let the house go, but not yet. Kind as she was, Nellie had continued to pay the property taxes, kept Bathory's town council pacified, and allowed Vlad time to heal. He hadn't yet done so. Vlad paused on the corner and looked down Lugosi Trail. His house was still standing, remaining structurally unharmed despite the fire. No one could tell Vlad how the fire had started or even how it had been extinguished. Only one room had burned, his parents' bedroom. The fire marshal had brought in several inspectors, but the only conclusion they'd reached was that there had been a brief flash in that room, burning everything and everyone who'd been in it to a crisp, while it had merely smoked and singed the rest of the home's interior. Vlad could feel Henry's eyes on him, as if waiting for Vlad to burst into tears. Vlad wouldn't. He'd resolved to stop crying in front of people, dealing with his grief on his own in the shadows of his secret space in the belfry of Bathory High. Vlad kept his eyes on the house as they approached. It looked exactly as it had the last time he'd seen it. The house was an odd, irregular shape, 2 stories with a 3-story tower attached. His bedroom had been at the bottom of the tower. On top of it was his parents' room, and on top of that was his dad's study. The exterior of the house was painted gray, except for the black gingerbread, which matched the roof's peaks. Atop his father's study was a wrought-iron widow's walk. Vlad used to play in the backyard at night, only to glance up and spy his parents swaying slowly together to music he couldn't hear from the ground. There might not have been music to dance to at all, but his parents danced anyway. He rubbed the thread of a tear away and reached for the key ring in his pocket. The door opened easily, and as it swung to the side, Vlad half expected to see his mother behind it, greeting him with a kiss on the forehead and questions about his day. She wasn't there, of course, but her favorite jacket was hanging on the coat tree next to the door.